You better hear! You better hear! You better hear from me! You better hear!
Mention Southend-on-Sea in casual conversation to anybody that doesn't live here, and it's not unlikely that the response will be a condescending snigger about Essex girls, white van man, or reality TV show The Only Way is Essex. But there's always been more to Southend than these often grotesque stereotypes. Close enough to the heart of London to get there in under an hour on the sea-to-sea line, Southend is also far enough away to have evolved its own distinctive cultural heritage and identity. In 2022, I published Southend on Zine, a book documenting the alternative history of the city as told through the fanzines, people's papers and community magazines made in the town over the last 50 years. A history from below, unlikely to be documented in the minutes of Southend Borough Council meetings or the archives of the Evening Echo newspaper. During my research, I gathered a wealth of material, including artefacts, oral histories and interviews, several of which I wasn't able to use for the book, but which opened up many portals into an otherwise lost or undocumented non-official other history of this city. Now is the time to tell these stories. The You Better Hear podcast is an expansion of the territory initially opened up by the book project, capturing, amplifying and celebrating these hidden voices. The places, faces, spaces and traces, including Southend's rich music history, the rock, punk, jazz, reggae, free improv and experimental scenes, and its clubs and venues. The LGBTQ histories, women's histories, art and cultural projects, protest, activism and anti-racist resistance, street theatre events and much more, linking this with the practice of present-day local zine makers and community and arts activists. Hello, I'm Graham Burnett. Welcome to the latest episode of the You Better Hear podcast. Running from May until late October 2025 at Southend's Beecroft Gallery, The Scene by the Sea is a major new exhibition by the Thames Group of Artists, celebrating and responding to the clubs, pubs, record shops and music venues that have made this city a creative epicentre. Featuring over 40 artists with estuary associations, it's a marvellous tribute to our vibrant and diverse musical community, and I'd recommend anybody to get along and check it out. Over the last few weeks, I've been speaking to project instigators Will Birch and Sharman, local walking musical encyclopedia Jackson Sloan of Rent Party, Cairon O'Shea and Dean Chalkley of the legendary Junk Club, plus a number of other contributors to this wonderful show. Here's local artist Simon Monk to tell us what it's all about.
The Thames Group of Artists is a loose kind of coalition of artists who have a connection with the estuary. Most of us live in Essex, but there are some London people who come from Southend. And we got together initially because our leading light and El Supremo, Charles Sharman, venerable actor and filmmaker, he wanted to do a show to do with T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. So he gathered a handful of us together and we each made a response to The Wasteland. And we had a demountable cardboard space and it toured just in the immediate region. Anyway, we wanted to do it again a few years afterwards, and we came up with the idea of doing something connected with Ian Dury, who, although he doesn't come from Southend, he has strong links with Southend, one of the unfortunate ones of which is that he caught polio in the public swimming baths on Southend seafront, which is now a casino. We got a bigger group this time, and we made artworks that responded to the lyrics of Ian Dury. But that exhibition had the kibosh put on it by the dreaded Lurgy in 2020. So that was delayed a year or two. But actually that That was bigger than the T.S. Eliot show. It toured more. It was in several venues in London, and again, it was a really big success. Anyway, we've done it for a third time. This is 10 years on from the T.S. Eliot show. This show is the biggest one yet, but it isn't going to tour. It's based at the Beecroft Gallery in Southend. It takes the whole ground floor. And this one is called The Scene by the Sea, and it's about Southend's music and youth culture and fashion, general, kind of Southend culture, a lot of it alternative. And this one had its starting point as a map that was a map of the area and all the significant, or many of the significant, art and culture venues that was done by Will Birch of the Kersal Flyers and the Records, and various books about music. And Cosmo Vinyl, who used to manage The Clash and lives in New York now, and Jules Baum, who is a graphic designer who designed several Clash record labels and was involved with Stiff Records. So that's on at the moment, and there's a programme of Sunday supplements, which are various talks and events at the Beecroft, alongside with the 5 or 6 month run of the show. So it's quite a big thing. We've had there was an amazing private view with over 400 people, which I think is a record for the Beecroft.
My name is Will Birch, and I used to play in groups that were based in Southend, primarily the Kersal Flyers. People might remember our hit Little Does She Know, and then other stuff since then. The book I wrote about the pub rock scene was called No Sleep Till Canvey Island, and of course it had a lot of Southend in it. So people like Mickey Jupp famously came out of Southend, Dr. Feelgood, my own group, Kersal Flyers. But we all, not so much Mickey, but certainly the Feelgoods and the Kersals really got a step onto the ladder via the London pub rock scene in the first half of the 1970s. With other groups like groups by Ian Dury and so forth, and Nick Lowe's group, So there's lots of people who went on to bigger stuff, but pub rock was really crucial to us. And I guess that was the seed of that book, and it was also focusing on Southend, a seed on the map, and this exhibition here as well. Back in 2019, Cosmo Vinyl sent me an email. And it said, did I ever tell you about the map idea? I didn't know what on earth he was going on about. So anyway, we had a little chat, and he had this idea of making a map of the Southend area going back to the 50s and maybe even earlier than that, of the music scene and the venues in Southend and the groups that came out of the Southend scene. And it sounded right up my street. So I said, I'm in on that. And he brought in Jules Baum, who's a graphic designer, to do the way the map would look. So basically, Jules was doing the look of the map, I was doing the information, if you like, and Cosmo was sort of bossing us around and telling us what to do next in his own way. He really drove it along, and he's a very funny guy as well. So it was a good little trio, worked really well together. But it did take us 5 years to arrive at where we're at today, with the map being printed and published.
Southend, we're going to the West End. Bedford City looks so pretty to see. Stafford be home, Barking, Westcliff on the sea. All the way to Horton, don't forget the Lincoln, Stamford, West Ham, Fenchurch, Street Station, won't you? Get here to this tiny tip and take that locomotive trip. Just say yes to the Wilco Express. Just say yes. Just say yes.
I'm Charles Sharman Cox, and my background is theatre. I decided what I wanted to do was do a staged production of T.S. Eliot's epic poem, The Wasteland. And I thought a really great place where we could stage it would be in an art gallery. And I said, look, I've got this idea to do a gallery piece of The Wasteland, and what I'm looking for is art based on the poem. So take a line from the poem and create a bit of art. Then approached the Arts Council, and we won an award to produce a touring pop-up art exhibition based on The Wasteland. And we toured that was 10 years ago, we toured that from London to Southend. up and down the river at fairs, festivals. We took it everywhere, and on the strength of that, we called ourselves the Thames Group of Artists. And then 5 years later, Simon was sitting in his studio and he had a visit from one of the other artists called Tad Blower. And on a wall was a picture of Ian Dury. And Tad said to Simon, he said, 2020 is the 20th anniversary of Ian Dury's death. And immediately we went, there's an idea for another exhibition. So I contacted the other artists in the group and they all bought into this idea. And I said to them, look, we all love the idea of doing this, but I'm not going to do it without Ian Dury's family, the estate of Ian Dury, giving us permission to do it. So then I got in touch with Will Birch. So through Will, because he was a pal, I managed to get to Sophie Dury, Ian's second wife, and Jemima Dury, who ran the estate, and Baxter Dury, the whole Dury family. And they all came on board and said, this is brilliant, the fact that you want to help celebrate the 20th anniversary and keep Ian's name alive. So we then did this second major exhibition. But after the first one, when we toured with a pop-up art gallery, which meant arriving in a transit van, unpacking the gallery like an IKEA build, joining it all together, putting the art in the same place, doing it, and then taking it down that day back into the van. It was. I vowed never to do that again. So this time, because now we had a reputation, I then got to galleries, and I found, I think it was 7 or 8 galleries across London, Essex, and Kent. Having said that, 2020 was COVID. I had all the art was brought to my house here where we're talking now, and it filled this room. And we were about to go to an art gallery in East London called Vutorini's. And I phoned Sophie Parkin, who ran Vutorini's, about 2 days before lockdown. I said, I'm a bit nervous, Sophie, about, there's talk of a lockdown. And she got, no, don't be ridiculous, because she wanted it in there. And I called the group up on our WhatsApp chat, said, what do you think? And everyone went, let's not do it. So then, we went into lockdown almost immediately, and I had that art stored in this room for, I think it was something like, over a year. And then, of course, what happened then, we were starting to come out of lockdown. Of course, I had to rearrange everyone, all the galleries wanted the show, but I had to rearrange the dates, the times, the places, whatever. But that was a pretty fantastic show, which we called All Kinds of Naughty. We managed to get an original Ian Dury piece of art. We got Humphrey Ocean involved. When Ian went to London to form Kilburn and the High Roads, he took Humphrey with him, and Humphrey was a member of Kilburn and the High Roads. Then another member of Kilburn and the High Roads was called Rob Melvin. Rob Melvin was the piano player, the keyboard player, and he wrote What a Waste with Ian. So that was another, we got him involved in the show. And also we managed to get Peter Blake involved in the show because Peter became a fan of Ian's band and he'd followed them around and did drawings backstage. And Norman Watroy, Ian's bass player, he did a picture of a drawing of Norman Watroy, and then Norman offered it to us. We approached Peter Blake, and Peter Blake was happy to put his name on the show. So we'd stepped into this world of art and rock and roll. So that was, then we think, well, that's the end of that. That was 5 years after, so that was 2021. We thought, well, that's the end of the Thames Group. What next? Who knows? And then out of the blue, Will came round to see me, and he said, Charles, and he showed me, brought this map out. He said, we had a cup of tea, and he looked at the map and he said, we've done this map. And the moment I saw all these venues that were on it, I just thought, there's another exhibition, and let's expand Thames Group even more and expand it to maybe let's try and get 40 artists this time, which is what we've got, and produce a really big show. At the same time, because our previous 2 shows have been at the Beecroft, Kevin Marsh, who curates the Beecroft exhibition, had always said to me, anytime you've got a show, we'll have it, because he knows the work and he knows that we deliver. So I went to see Kevin and said, look, we've got this map, I can put an art exhibition together with various artists. Would you be interested? And he said 100%, and offered us an immediate 5-month exhibition.
And the music venue that immediately sprung to mind was the Queen's Hotel. I'm going to see Rent Party in the early 80s. It was just a brilliant spectacle. It was we dressed up. I'd dress up in my mum's old taffeta dress, and we'd love the music. We loved the dancing. We were jive dancing, but it didn't matter if you didn't do it properly. And that was all part of the fun. That was all part of being in that scene.
Late at night, when I got home, red light flashing and I can't let go. Automatic loving is what she needs. Pushing my button does what she please. I'm moving forward and I can't let go. She's got me on remote control. You turn me off, then you turn me on. Tell me, baby, what I do wrong. I finally been slow and I can't say no. Switch my channels and I lose control. I'm hot fire, you press go. Got me on remote control.
My name is Jackson Sloan. I was born in Southend on Sea. Grew up with a real love of live music and buying records. Rent Party started at the railway. We were rehearsing upstairs because I used to go to the Odyssey Folk Club and a lot of the pubs in Southend. And I basically had a love of early rhythm and blues and rock and roll and swing. And I said to the guy, "Would you let us rehearse?" He said, "Yeah." And then after he heard us, he said, "Well, come down." Well, we only had 4 songs. He said, "Just keep repeating them." So that's what we did. So that would have been 1980. And then basically a promoter come down from London who was promoting rock and roll at the Queen's Hotel and said, "Would you like to come and play on a Friday night at the Queen's?" So we were doing Saturday night at the railway and Friday night at the Queen's Hotel. And obviously there were big bands around and other big bands, but for what we were doing, swing, rhythm and blues, there wasn't many people doing it. When I heard that Will Birch had done this map of Cosmo Vinyl, the exciting thing for me was growing up in Southend and going to most of these venues and spending my day trawling around the record shops, you had Guy Norris, you had Record Museum, you had Pete Eden's, you had Golden Disc, you had Parrot Records, you had Record Exchange. You had so many record shops. You could spend a day just trawling round York Road. I'd go to the Southend Youth Centre, watch, Steve Hooker or a punk band that was just starting up. I would go to see Lou Lewis at Southend Carnarvon Road College. I would go to see Dr. Feelgood. I would go to see all the local bands like Diamond Jack Band, Fast Eddie, they would play the Top Alex. So Dino's Marvels down at the Halfway House. But also I would go to, rock and roll events at the Long Bar, and my sister was a rocker and she used to go down there and tell me, they wouldn't let me in sometimes because I wasn't old enough, but I would still go along and sort of listen and wait outside. I just was fascinated. I remember seeing Vivian Stanshall, and when I was very, very young, with a on a pink racer, sprayed pink with a German World War I helmet on, going down the high street. But that was the anarchic side of Viv Stanshall. He was, a revolutionary in music and what to wear and what not to wear, But again, a very interesting character. And so you basically go to Chris Stevens. You'd have a look at all the stuff you couldn't buy, but you'd hear musicians talking, and then there used to be a coffee shop in Queen's Road opposite, and we used to sit in there, and you said, "What's going on tonight?" Well, you've got so-and-so at the Grand, so-and-so's down the Esplanade, someone's at Barron's, someone's at the Top Alex, someone's down the Halfway House. It just... there's a gig at the Kurzall tonight. There's a gig at the Estuary Rooms. it was just so many gigs going on and parties. So when this map came along, I was so delighted, you know. And people said, "Well, you've left the grand out, or you've left this out." But the fact that he done it and actually financed it, 5,000 maps, all out of his own pocket, Will Birch, I think is a real fantastic thing to do for the town and for music lovers like myself and you, Graham, and other people.
So I grew up some years in the Blue Boar pub in Southend. I have really warm memories of this building. It was full of characters and different people every day, really interesting people. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday was live music. So there was always musicians around. So lots of bits and pieces I've used in my piece of work, The Boozer, are about the musical aspects of the pub. But also I really wanted to feed in my kind of personal history with this building. There's quite a kind of ghostly history to this building, and many people have seen different things. So I've included some kind of skulls and bits and pieces in my work to reflect on that part of the pub. And when my mum was the landlady, she was the boss, and the boss had the bell. The pub is all about the bell. So the central piece of my work is a bell, because you ring the bell when the pub is finished, when the shift is over. Also, there used to be a piano in here, and random people used to play the piano. So I luckily found a piano before I began this piece of work. So that's why there's piano keys in it. But if you look really intricately, there's lots of musical instruments that have been taken apart. It was a live music pub.
My name is Cairon O'Shea. I'm a graphic designer, graphic artist, and a promoter. So Junk Club was originally started by Oliver von Blitzkrieg Abbott and Reese Spiderweb, who kind of note because he went on to form the Horrors band. And it was started in about September 2002. And myself joining them as well in the first party, and originally just doing all the artwork and that side of stuff. I didn't really have any records, and it grew over. I mean, up until I think the last party was in 2006, at which point we kind of I think the Horrors were a pretty big band. We'd had these New Puritans had risen up as well, being signed, and we'd actually had, I think, Hedy Slimane, who was the head of Christian Dior Menswear at the time, come down to the club and poach all the young kind of 16, 17, 18-year-old kids and whisk them off to Paris to be on a catwalk show for Christian Dior. I think, and the Puritans wrote the soundtrack to it. And we held a funeral in around about then, and people brought flowers, and it was dead, and that was it, man. So it was a kind of very, what would you say, fertile 4 years of, I think, 43 parties we did in that time. Some of them just in the basement, a few other venues, but a few of them the musicals were kind of taking over the whole of the Royal Ballroom and basement. We'd have kind of 500 kids in there. You know, built something quite special, I think.
I mean, just to sort of rewind a bit as well, Cairon and myself, and Will, of course, you know, are all, you know, from Southend, and I live in London now. But the thing is, the Thames is still coursing around my veins, and it's something that will never wash out thoroughly. You know what I mean? It's always there, and I'm proud of that. In actual fact, you know what I mean? It's not a simple place to define, and just even thinking about the music scene and even the club culture, it has a veneer which is actually interesting as well. So there's a ritzy nature to it. There's clubs like Tots, for example. This is like the veneer, and then underneath that, or you could say when you rewind culturally back from that a bit, you're getting all these other things, and there's so much more going on. And also its proximity to London, but its separation from London kind of gives it this difference and its own incubation place. You know, its own test tube in a way that you wouldn't get anywhere else, and it's not even really been appreciated enough, even though there's so much that's come out of it. And that's why with the map that the guys have made, it's really great, because it's not only shows all these fantastic places, but it's really interesting because there's unusual places like a field where David Bowie played. You know, it's like, it's not necessarily the obvious stuff, and but I've got my own personal memories, and my connection was that I was coming back to see my folks here who still live in Southend, and I come back all the time, see friends here. I picked up a flyer for Junk Club one time, and then that led to eventually going to the club and meeting Cairon, meeting Reese, meeting Oliver, all the other people, Johanna. So many other people that were going down there, and I thought it was so fantastic. I took some photographs, went back to the NME and showed them the photographs, and they said, "Wow, this is amazing. We'd like to show some of these photographs in the magazine. Would that be all right?" And then it kind of amplified, and I came back and photographed a lot, and I'm very pleased to say that did an exhibition, and that was on the last weekend of Junk.
The last Junk in 2006.
We're now outside what used to be the Harold Dog Coffee Bar. Great place to hang out, meet people and listen to some great music. When I was looking at the map to see where I could choose to illustrate, the Harold Dog was one of the first things that I hit upon. I used to come here quite a lot when I was a very young teenager, and they had a great jukebox. My favourite song on the jukebox was Nina Simone's I Put a Spell on You, so I wanted to illustrate that in some way. Stitching has become part of my newest work. Words are very important to me, so it felt very relevant to stitch the words onto cloth, and then that led me on to making a similar piece when I looked at Nasty. Because that was about punk clothing. So the stitching has actually opened up a whole new avenue of work for me, which has been very, very interesting.
My name is Simon Monk. I come from Southend and I live in Southend, and I'm a painter. So I kind of thought I wouldn't be able to be in the show because I didn't have anything that I'd made especially for the show. That was a commissioned piece for a forthcoming short film about Gilbert and George. And that image is going to be used as the poster. But there are 3 films, all directed by Ian B. MacDonald, who's a film-making luminary from Southend, who lives in LA now. And he made a 16mm film in the early 90s, when he'd only recently been a student at Southend School of Art and Design. He got in contact with Gilbert and George and made a film about their journey down to Southend from Fournier Street, which is their home off Brick Lane. But Charles, in his wisdom, thought that because the film was about Gilbert and George coming to Southend, lots of scenes shot on the pier and along the Golden Mile, he thought it was relevant enough to be included, and I am really glad to be part of it as well.
What a wonderful day out, Gilbert.
Yes, we had a fantastic day.
Wonderful, very.
How do you feel?
I feel very refreshed and brainy.
Me too. Wonderful. Very good.
So I'm Victoria Seals and I'm an artist from Westcliff. The gold mine was a club on Canvey, and it sort of ran from 1972 to 80. 9, so it ran for a long time. And its heyday, it was a sort of maybe late 70s, early 80s, and people would come from all over the UK in coach loads just to come to the club, which is kind of hard to believe now. But there were a lot of famous people that even went there, so Sade and Alison Moyet, Talk, and it was kind of the place to be seen. I thought about but how the stories of past clubs or any kind of history can sometimes be told or misrepresented, and especially on the internet where it's really unregulated. And so I kind of thought, right, I could use these AI images to really kind of say that this alternative history exists, which is known as Uchronia, and kind of explore that theme. So the more that you look at my paintings, which are kind of scenes on the dance floor in this supposed 1970s era, the more you can see they're not actually real. But it's not that obvious when you first look, and it's kind of how we read stories on the internet, and the more you probe, the more you might find that they are lies. I'm an artist that can't really draw direct from my memory, so I need a reference image. So that's why AI or any kind of photographic imagery works for me, because I will use it as a reference to draw from. So yes, then I will normally work on wood, and I draw the image first, and then I will do an underpainting in image that I can work on top of, and then I'll work on towards the foreground, and finally leave with a layer of a glaze. So it's, yeah, there are quite a lot of layers that go into the imagery. I mounted it on a piece of thick kind of mahogany kind of wood, which I wanted to represent the dance floor. And then the 9 images are mounted next to each other in a grid, but with Chris Hill, the DJ, in the centre, which was on purpose because he was the one that brought everybody together. Yeah, so Chris Hill was probably one of the first superstar DJs, and he would encourage sort of an inclusive atmosphere where everybody would be dancing together, and they would have this chant, and when you go to work tomorrow, where will you say you were? And everyone would chant, I was there, and that's why my piece is called I Was There ? Because it is a lie, because I wasn't there, and it's AI.
What are you going to say when you go to work tomorrow? I was there. I was there. I was there. I was there. I was
That ends the department of the broadcast on behalf of the National Funk Party.
I've lived in Hadley ever since I was a child, and the Kingsway Cinema in Hadley is quite a strong memory from childhood. So we're in Hadley High Street. This is where the Kingsway Cinema music hall used to be. It was there from the 1930s right the way through to 1970 when it was knocked down. I can remember playing on the demolition site with friends as young teenagers, and it became our playground. The Who played there in '67, and I remember it, but not because I attended, because I was too young, but my brother was a Who fan and he's 5 years older than me, and he went. And so I just sort of thought, what if I imagined the cinema and the people visiting the Who concert at a time when the mod movement was very much at its height. And so what I've done is to produce an imagined interpretation of what that night might have been like.
It was a day of celebration in local history when the old mods got their scooters out, circa 1963. Some wanted a ride to Brighton, but we chose Southend-on-Sea, so we set off down the A13 to the scene beside the sea. Mohair Freddie Johnson still had his 175, and Terry Smith, his old Sportique, more dead though than alive. Lilda Pill from Leeson's Hill was on the back of Sammy Pierce, and Reggie Stone, still on his own after more than 30 years. Johnny Pinstripe Collier on his chrome Lambretta TV, and Fab Tab Mickey Sarsons turned up on his GT. Eric, the Swede, Larson, still had that same French crop. But Shorty Sammy Matthews was losing his up top. Blue Beat Vic Dennison in that same old pork pie hat. We told him that it suited him, but we thought he looked a brat. Brace's Johnny Jones turned up with his best mate Mickey Green and his cousin Crewneck Wilson, who looked like Steve McQueen. Oh, the fabulous Pinky came at last. We called him the Brighton Rock. His girl was wearing glass-heeled shoes with "I really love him" on her frock. One of the late arrivals was the quiet man, Roger Smith, on his black GS 160 and his hair in a 60s quiff. We danced to 60s music, it really was a thrill. Rick Phillips sorted it, but we helped him with the bill. We did the dog, and the Watusi, the shake, the twist, the slide. When some of us had had enough, we took our scooters for a ride. We were sorry when it was over. We'd all had such a laugh. So we all got together for a nostalgic photograph. Not everyone could be there. Some of us was dead. So we held a minute's silence, and a little prayer was said.
Thanks for listening to this edition of the You Better Hear podcast. On this show, you heard the voices of Simon Monk, Will Birch, Charles Sharman Cox, Julie O'Sullivan, Jackson Sloan, Catriona Faulkner, Kieran O'Shea, Dean Chalkley, Jenny Sharman Cox, Victoria Sills and Tony Branch. You also heard the sounds of Johnson Willis, John House and Georgina Field performing live aboard the inaugural journey of the Wilko Express train on the C2C line running between Shoeburyness and Fenchurch Street on the 9th of June 2025. Remote control by Jackson Sloan and friends. These New Puritans at the Junk Club and Triangle Studios 2006. Gilbert and George from Ian B. McDonald's film Day Tripping Again. Chris Hill at the Canvey Island Gold Mine. And The Mod Reunion, written by Norman Burkett and performed by Charles Sharman Cox. The theme song You Better Hear is by Southend's first punk band, The Machines, from their True Life EP on Wax Records, released in 1978. Thanks to everyone who helped out, especially Charles Sharman Cox for the sound clips of Julie O'Sullivan, Catriona Faulkner, Jenny Sharman Cox and Tony Branch, Kieran O'Shea for the sound clips of These New Puritans, and Paul Brown for technical support. This show is dedicated to Will Williams, co-producer of Southend's other paper, Mushroom, who passed away in May 2025. I'm Graham Burnett. Look forwards to seeing you all again soon.